Welcome to another episode of The Brand Code You, a podcast which brings you knowledge, leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Fritz Bussemaker, and today I'm pleased to have with us John Swift. John, welcome to the program.
Fritz, thanks for having me. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
John, allow me to briefly introduce you to our audience before we get into the discussion. You're the managing director at Rockfleet Financial Services, which is a leading private capital and wealth management firm. You are a Wall Street veteran, and you pioneered in digital advisory platforms. And I now come to the second part of your resume, which I find even more curious because you are a CIA trained chef, former musician, and you spent 16 years volunteering as a head chef fighting for food insecurity.
Yep.
So, hey, a lot to talk about. And well, let's make certain that people don't get the wrong impression. When I present you as a CIA trained chef, that is correct, but it's not what people think about.
Correct. Those three letters can mean different things to different people. And when I tell people I trained at the CIA, I assume they understand that as the Culinary Institute of America in beautiful Hyde Park, New York, in the Hudson Valley. But other people think of it as some sort of covert spy organization,
Yeah.
which it can be as well. But they don't really train chefs, as far
Yeah.
as I know.
Okay. Well, how often did that mistake happen when you told people?
Oh, yeah, about 50% of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I mean, even Americans, they hear CIA and they immediately go to the spy organization. But
Mm.
true foodies, true culinarians understand what those three letters mean.
Good. Okay. Now, you shared your bio up front with me, and a couple of things which stuck out when I had a look at it. First of all, you put in there, put himself through Pace University without taking a dime of college debt. That's in.
Correct.
Why did you put that in there?
So, there are many things broken in the world, and I think the education system, at least in America, is part of that. Everyone seems to be under pressure to get a degree, even though they might not know what they want to be when they grow up. Early on, let's hit the rewind button a little. Part of that is because when I was in high school, I was able to kind of know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I was hustling some internships, which really can't be done today in high school. I was working for a Fortune 500 company when I was a sophomore in high school. I was working at American Express, and they basically hired me as soon as I graduated high school. But I really wanted to pursue academic endeavors that maybe could help me. But I realized that a lot of my friends didn't know what they wanted to be when they grow up, and they were taking on college debt. College, university is not cheap.
No.
Um, I was able to put myself through, the amount of training I needed to get. I didn't necessarily need a degree because I already had the job that you generally need a degree for. And I made a conscious decision to not just, hey, I'm going to go to university and try and figure it out. I work experience was very important to me first, and it allowed me to really, where do I want to focus? And I think I also mentioned to you in my bio that I don't necessarily have letters after my name. I don't
So you,
have
you you got
MBA.
you
I
got
have
numbers.
numbers. Those
Yes.
are different professional designations. Specifically in the US, those numbers are from FINRA, which is our regulator in the securities industry. And I was able to really focus where I needed to learn based upon what I wanted to do. So instead of taking a general approach, I took a very specific approach to life. And that's one of the things I try and have conversations with when I'm dealing with interns. We run an intern program here at UBS. I'm sorry, here at UBS. That was several careers
Yeah.
ago. Here at Rockfleet, but it was at UBS where I really started getting involved with intern programs, and I realized there were a lot of boys and girls who maybe didn't know what they wanted to be when they grew up, but they pursued academic careers because they thought that was the place to go, or they were pursuing the career post the academic experience because they thought that was the place to go. And my goal was to, one of the things is to coach them. It's a big wide world out there. Make sure when you say I want to be this when I grow up, that you can really maintain passion about it. I mean, even in my instance, growing up in New York, Wall Street finance or insurance was one of the three regional types of things that I was going to get into, or that you would normally get into if you lived in that area, right?
Okay. Yeah.
In other instances, if you grew up in say Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the U.S., you'd possibly be a steel worker. If you grew up in West Virginia, you'd be a coal miner. In the five boroughs of New York, you basically went into the city to work in one of those three industries. Um, but even so, midway through my career, I decided to take a pause and just do something different. And that's when I went to the Culinary Institute to let me explore my passions. And it's very important for people to understand what you think you want or what other people want for you is not necessarily what you potentially could and should be doing. So it's important to keep your eyes and ears open and look at various
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, what you said, something that I find that quite significant, something I see quite a lot in my own life, but with others around me, what other people want for you. So it's the other people, it's the environment which tells you what you want to do. So what's your take on that? I mean, because you also advise young people out there. So how do you combine advising young people out there and avoiding telling people what they should be doing and being able to figure it out?
Sure, absolutely. And I guess that's the art form, right? How do you provide that advice without making it prescriptive? Um, so again, there are a lot of pressures from either parents or peer groups to go into the thing that is deemed to be, the profession of the moment or something that seems stable. Um, and again, when I was, 15, 16, 17 years old, and I wanted to be a professional athlete, but I knew that wasn't going to necessarily come to fruition, right? So I had to find something else. But I didn't limit myself. I wanted to go into the world of Wall Street, but I didn't say I want to go into investment bank. I started off in technology,
Mhm.
and my career path has been very wide in terms of what I was able to experience. But I noticed that a lot of people today are very narrow, and I deal with a lot of interns who I need to be an investment banker, and that's because they think it pays well, and it can pay well. But are you going into it for the right reasons? Are you going into it because it's attractive from a compensation standpoint? Because you give up a lot of your free time. Being an investment banker is quite the undertaking. It's a lot of investment in learning. It's a lot of investment in time. It's really hard. A lot of investment bankers I know have a tough time balancing the work um, home life balance, right? So, and a lot of people who are early in their career don't necessarily understand that. And again, they think they want something until they get into it, and then they realize, this wasn't what I thought it was. So my advice to these people, and it usually comes out in an interview process. You can tell someone who's truly passionate about something as opposed to someone who is checking boxes and is taking the paces because they think it's what they want to do, or someone else told them that they want to do, or they feel pressure to do it. And if I sense that they're passionate about it, they have a clear vision of
Yeah.
what they want to do, they already know the steps, they see where they want to be 5, 10 years from now, I run with them in that direction. If they're hesitant about it, I try and just open up doors for them to maybe see the world slightly different than they're doing. I'm not telling them that they're wrong. I'm not telling them that they should do other things. I'm just saying, hey, you might want to look
Okay.
at
So,
a
so
larger
yeah.
picture.
So what I'm hearing you say is if you want to coach people, young people, it's not about giving them advice, but it's also pointing out what the consequences is of making a decision by following up advice.
Sort of, right? That's the coaching versus
Yeah.
managing
Yeah.
thing, right? I tend to take a coaching approach, and truly, I play team sports, so
Yeah.
coaching means different things to different people. But the whole idea, my best coaches were able to get a better performance out of me, making me see things in myself, my abilities that got me to be a better teammate, that got our team to win, maybe individual accolades followed. Um, and I took all of the best experiences I've had with coaches, but I've had bad ones too. So you see the good and the bad, and I applied that to my professional approach. And I've noticed in my career, there were people who were managers and they would manage people like they would attempt to manage problems. And there's already a disconnect there because if you're managing people like a thing, it's probably not going to have a great end result. So I purposely take a coaching approach. I don't tell people what to do. I show people what the game plan is and then try and have them adjust their game accordingly. But it's up to them to adjust their game accordingly. So basically, it's like that in life. Like,
Okay.
take a look at what you're doing and maybe adjust the game.
So what happens, what would your advice be if somebody out there listening to this realizes my manager, the person I have to report to, is actually in the former category, in the first category?
Sure.
What's your advice?
So it realizing that that concept exists is half the battle. Some people don't even understand that, right? Because that's their only experience. This is the way it
Yeah.
is. This is what it is. And again, with people early in their career, they don't have that body of work. I tell people, look, I could point out the potholes that I've stepped in. And if you want to step in that pothole because you want to get dirty or injure yourself, fine. But I'm telling you, that's a pothole, avoid it. And some people want the experience. It's being able to show people who are early in their career that, just keep your eyes and ears open. You may have a situation that looks like this, but maybe there's more to that. And ways to solve for that is just communication. Just understand, things to ask, things to look for. Half the battle, people go through the whole process of getting academically credentialed and paying lots of money to do so.
Mhm.
But it gives you a limited skill set. You can be very technically proficient in the thing you study, but once you get thrown out into you come out of the academic world into the professional world, there's this whole political landscape. How do you actually move through the layers of management? How do you actually interact with your manager or your manager's manager? And in some places there's no one ever really teaches you that.
Yeah.
There's no manual when you walk into a job on day one is how to communicate with your bosses, how what should you expect in a performance review, how should you even approach the upcoming year, because you know that a mid-year review is coming, a post-year review is coming. How do you maintain lines of communication so that there aren't misunderstandings, so you could recognize, are you being managed or are you being coached? People have different learning and communication styles. So you have to understand yours in order to understand how you view the world and how you like to be communicated with, and understand that there are differences in people.
Yeah.
And because you can do it one way and they're doing it another way, there could be a very big disconnect there.
Yeah.
So it's just showing them those types of concepts, making them be aware of that, and watching what they do with those concepts. And even in internships that I have here, which are limited amounts of time, I see absolute growth. You could just see the eyes opening and the brain cells expanding, like, ooh, different concept. Let me run with that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You were going to ask a question, I think.
Yeah. No, I'm fascinated what you're sharing with me, but also it made me think about what I also read, what your background is. As mentioned, you put your through university. You don't have that finance background, and I was thinking of the phrase entitlement. That uh, people who assume that they are entitled to something don't constantly think about, hey, is this what I should be doing with my life? So because of the position they come from, they feel entitled and they don't think about it. And what you are telling me is, because you're definitely not entitled, at least that's how I perceive it, um, you have a much more conscious choice. Is this where I want to go and how I'm going to get there?
Yeah, so I think you bring up a good point, right? It really all depends on what vector you're approaching this from, right?
Yeah.
Um, As a kid growing up in the five boroughs of New York City, it was very middle class, and it was my friends and neighbors were all first and second generation German and Italian, migrated over from the Second World War, part of the baby
Yeah.
boomer population. And it was just a bunch of kids figuring it out together. And so we didn't have parents or relatives that were in high places that you came into the family business or had connections. We worked from a young age, and it's you kind of realize what you wanted to do and didn't want to do. So there was a lot of experience that went into that. Um, I never assumed I'm entitled to anything, right? It's you got to work for it,
Yeah.
and I will encounter people who have had different upbringings, and you can see that they're looking at they're looking at their career from a different position. And in those instances, you have a coaching conversation with them that tries to open up their eyes to that's your view of the world, that's your learning and communication style. Understand that there are others because um, it again, just going in with just an academic degree doesn't guarantee you anything except you've spent a lot of money and it might open up a couple of doors, but that's not going to make you a better person or a happier person
Yeah.
or a person who understands how to navigate.
Good point. Hey, I'm going to switch back to the cryptic introduction as you being a CIA trained chef, John,
Sure.
because that fascinates me, being a foodie myself. Um, Related to that, you spent 16 years as a volunteer head chef fighting food insecurity.
Yeah.
What was the main motivator? Being able to cook or being able to fight food insecurity?
Okay, so my I was already well into my Wall Street career when sort of the universe happened. I had already spent 10 plus years at a firm in the US called Paine Webber. It was a national bulge bracket firm that was assumed by UBS. A lot of people on the planet know who UBS is.
Yeah.
And UBS basically, as they were expanding in the mid to late 90s, needed a wealth management arm in the United States, and they took over Paine Webber, and which was great. It really opened up a lot of doors for people. But at that point, I was like, all right, this is good, but what do I want to be when I grow up? So I took a pause. And from a financial perspective, I was able to do that. I was lucky enough that the buyout that UBS provided to Paine Webber employees who owned stock at one number and they took it at another number. I just wanted to recharge my batteries. I was afforded an opportunity that many people don't get, and I decided to take advantage of it. And at age 38, I became a student. I went to the Culinary Institute of America, enrolled as a student, and I was sitting in classes and kitchens with 18 and 19-year olds. And it was the best experience I ever had. Now, food is a passion. Why did I do that? I mentioned I grew up in the five boroughs, first generation German Italian neighborhoods. Um, my neighborhood specifically was six family homes. We had these apartment buildings, and in each of the six family, it was three floors, two apartments on each floor. As you would come in from playing, you would smell amazing food coming from each of these. And everyone had kids. I literally had over 100 friends just on my block based upon the numbers. So you're constantly going to your friend's house or having them over for dinner or lunch, and everyone had an open door. And I would literally just walk in like, that smells delicious. What are you doing here? What is that food? I was the American mutt, and I had all these other influences that were coming in. And believe it or not, I don't look at now, but I was actually this skinny when I was a kid. And I just could eat everything. And everyone's mother would love me as the kid who could eat anything. So I grew up with all kinds of food. And my grandmother would always have Sunday dinner and she would cook, and I would always go into the kitchen and help her, when I was young. So there was always this passion for eating and creation. I think creation is also part of my story. As you mentioned, I played in the band. I'm sort of a graphic artist and designer and photographer, but it really started with being able to make people happy by cooking. And I said, you know what? I'm going to chase a passion. I'm going to, I don't know if that's what I want to be when I grow up.
Mhm.
And at 38, you're a little too old to be thinking about becoming a chef, but let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
And it was great because I was able to examine that passion, saw what it actually took, because a lot of my fellow classmates who were 18 and 19 were coming into that because they thought it was cool, because that was the rise of the celebrity chef. You had TV shows about
Yeah.
celebrity chefs, and they didn't quite understand the amount of backbreaking work that goes into it and the failure rate that occurs when you're trying to open up a restaurant. They think, hey, I'm going to come out of the CIA. I'm going to open up a restaurant. I'm going to get Michelin stars. I'm going to be a rock star. And I knew that wasn't the path, but and some of my classmates did go on to do great things. Others, they became plumbers after the fact, and that's just the natural progression of things. So I loved cooking for people, loved cooking for family, and when my wife and I moved to Westchester County, New York, I was seeing signs in front of one of the local churches there that every Saturday they had an open door, hot meals for anybody. It wasn't a soup kitchen. It was more set up as a place where lower income families could go to a restaurant almost, right? And that's what it was. This wasn't homeless people, which is a different problem, and I wanted to address that well. But when I looked out, it was the people who fortunately you and I can go to a restaurant with our family on a Saturday, right? Spend some money and enjoy a meal. They weren't necessarily in that position to do it. So myself and a couple of others, we saw what was happening here, and we decided to give them restaurant quality food for free. Here it is. And we partnered with several other church organizations, other food pantries, grocery stores. We would go say, look, hey, we're cooking today. What can you do? Um, in Westchester County, New York, there were a bunch of smaller farms that we partnered with, and we were able to get fresh produce. And we never knew what we were cooking. So the challenge for me was being able to create something, being able to work on a team, because when you're in a kitchen cooking for 100, 150 people, it's very much a team sport, right? You got to play your position, you've got to play it well, you've got to execute. So that all appealed to me. And then the whole muscle memory of being able to provide high quality food for 150 people. I can cook well at home, but to do it for 150 people, you have to have that muscle memory and do it over and over again. So that opportunity to do it weekly was very attractive to me. And it turned out, we grew the program. People, word of mouth spread. It's successful. Unfortunately, I moved away. They're still doing it. I'm in search of a program now where I live here in Florida to do the same thing, and I'll eventually find it. If I can't find it, I might just build it
Create it
myself.
yourself. Yeah, who knows? Wow. Um, what do you have a role model or something or someone who what inspires you to do what you're doing? What drives you?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Obviously, my parents instilled a lot in me. So, if I had to point to role models, it was them. In terms, and again, middle class people work hard, do the right thing, be a good person. So that helped along the way. But throughout my professional career, yeah, there were people who saw things in me that I never knew existed. Again, I started on Wall Street in technology, and then wound up in marketing, and then wound up in sales, and even within sales and product development. And it was from people saying, "Ooh, you're good at that. I'm going to bring you over here." I'm like, I don't even know how to spell that department, let alone anything about it. And that helped me then look at people in a different way and say, "Ooh, they don't even realize they have that thing." And there were several interns that I was able to do this with, in terms of, wow, you're pointing in this direction, but you really should explore this thing that you're not even aware you have. because that's a trait, again, that's not taught in school. That if you can find someone to coach that, you're going to get to the next level in a much quicker
Yeah.
manner
Okay.
than maybe just going through the paces.
Yeah. How did you know, by the way, that that advice you were giving or that observation, if that was honest and correct?
That's called the leap of faith, my friend. And sometimes you got to put yourself out of the comfort zone and jump. And the first time, not gonna lie, terrifying, because you don't know if you're gonna land, and even if you do land, how you're going to land. And after the first time you do it, you're terrified. You wake up, you dust yourself off, and you say, that was interesting. And now I'm doing this. And then the second time you do it, it gets a little easier. And the third time you do it, it's a little easier. Then now you're coaching people. Look, just trust me, man. This is how you jump.
Yeah. So
And that's sort of it. But it's you got to believe a little bit in yourself. And again, you most people have a good sense of, am I getting good advice or am I getting bad advice?
yeah. So have there been experiences where you jumped and realized I'm actually falling? This was a mistake. And how did you cope with that?
You're asking a good question. I have fortunately, have I jumped and it was a mistake? I maybe made a side jump,
Mhm.
and it's and maybe that was me getting ahead of myself, saying, "Hey, I can jump. Let me try jumping over
Yeah.
here." I'm not out here saying you should look for every chance to jump and jump, but there are some times when you think you're comfortable. It's usually when you're comfortable, right? You're kind of stuck in a rut that you don't want to jump. So it's being able to determine jumping for the right reason.
It's
Um,
yeah, I'm hearing
I
you
don't know
say
that
don't
I,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just hearing you say don't be cocky.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
well, or, cocky, overconfident,
Yeah.
and the expectation, right? I am a firm believer of the universe provides. We are where we are supposed to be, doing what we're doing with the people with whom we're doing it. And sometimes that really has to happen organically, right? You can't force it.
Mhm.
Don't jump for the sake of jumping. But sometimes it might not make sense to you, and you should at least explore the possibility of jumping. Maybe that's a better way of answering that
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, it answered already a question which I haven't asked you explicitly yet, and that's what your advice to young managers would be starting their own career. And I think you've actually covered that throughout the whole discussion we had so far. So I actually want to end with a question which very much relates to my own passion, and that is, what is your signature dish?
Everyone asks that question, and it's usually, what do you enjoy cooking most?
Okay, yeah, or eating. When you went to those all those families when you're back home, which door did you knock on because that was the best food ever?
Oh, but you know what? There's no right answer to that. There's no one thing, right? I learned even what German style cooking was, Italian style cooking. I mean, we take it for granted because you can go to a restaurant, right? You can get any ethnicity and be involved in it. But to growing up, it's the whole family experience. The family, the men were in the living room in the yard, and the women were in the kitchen, and then they'd come together around the table and share the stories. And the Italian families in their backyards usually had grape arbors, and they were making their own wine. So even when you were 8 years old, you were getting a glass of wine with your dinner. Um, and it's really whatever I'm in the mood for. I mean, there was a time, I'll point back to when I was living in Westchester County. I went from being a city boy to a country boy, and I was able to plant my own garden. And I was fascinated by native Mexican food. I'm not talking about Taco Bell or the places you can go to, but true Mexican family style cooking. And I was able to grow a Mexican garden, and I grew varietals of tomatoes and peppers and herbs that I took into, and I did research in traditional cooking. I went through an Asian cooking stage, like, because fascinated with ingredients, and behind all of these, there's history and culture. And for me, it's not just about the eating; it's just a learning of the, like, how did this even come to being? training at the Culinary Institute of America, you trained as a French chef.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about a French kitchen, it's called a French brigade system. And the reason why that was, it's through the Napoleonic eras, you had to feed hundreds of thousands of soldiers. And it was very much a military setup in the kitchen. But these guys traveled, these men and women traveled with the armies, and whatever was within the region, they had to cook with. New types of foods, new types of vegetables, new types of, where does cheese come? You can just get into the history of cheese, which I love, and it varies from region to region and time period from time period and how these things came into existence. My love of beer turned into how do you make it and what's the history of that? It turned out, monks were trying to make bread and it spoiled, and they realized that suddenly you can drink this stuff maybe, and let's make a business out of it. So food tells a story to me, and it really all depends on what I'm in the mood for at the moment. So, but I am actively, you're asking the right question. I'm actively seeking a signature dish because I've been invited to many people's homes to cook. That's the other thing too. No one wants to cook for you anymore. When you go to the CIA, everyone becomes intimidated. Oh, I can't cook for you now. I'm like, no, I really like that dish you always made for me. Nothing has changed. But I do want to, and maybe it's a vanity project, but I do want to have the one thing that I can cook. I just can't settle on what it is because I just love too much. It's why settle for one thing when all of these things are out there. So we'll figure it out.
I think that makes absolute sense. Maybe you shouldn't have a signature dish, but see what's available, and that's going to turn into a signature dish.
And I think you're right on that. That was one of the things going back to the volunteer program. We never knew what we had to cook with. There was a pantry that we could pull from that the churches all put together, but you never knew what was in there. And we'd go on a Friday to see what was available. And then if we didn't have enough, we'd go to either some of the farms or like, what do you want to donate? Or some of the grocery stores, hey, we're a little short on something. And we'd have to pull it together in a short amount of time. It was almost like a game show where you're being given a bunch of ingredients. You have an hour to put it together and serve up a great food that is going to be appealing to people and also nutritional. And I think that's where I perform best. Again, being creative, being able to think outside the box, being able to make it up as I go along.
I'm fascinated, and it was an honor to talk to you, John, about your work, not only in you could say, the financial services industry, but also what being a CIA-trained chef can bring you. Hey, I want to thank you so much for being on the Brand Con You and sharing so much valuable advice to everybody out there. Thank you so much.
Fritz, it's been an honor. I really appreciate the invitation. I didn't know what to expect, and you've made it a great experience. And hopefully, someone who's listening or watching or consuming this podcast in one way, shape, manner, or form gets at least one nugget. If a person out there can find one thing of value that we spoke about, then my mission was accomplished.
I'm expecting this is mission accomplished. Thank you again.
All right. Well, listen, it's been great. I look forward to potentially having a future conversation, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.